Um, so I just wanted to say welcome. We'll be starting with probably about 30 minutes of different talks. And then the second half of the talk will be a Q&A section. So if you have any questions, please do pop it in the chat. Or if you have any questions at the end, do make a note and we'll come to you and you can ask your questions directly to Nahid, Emma, Sylvie, or any of the students. But with that, thank you again for joining us, and I'll pass over to Sylvie now. Thank you.
Just to ask, are we presenting the slides? Is that happening? Or?
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen now.
Cool. Yes, yeah, in the meantime, welcome everybody. It's lovely to see so many new faces and also so many familiar faces. So this is basically a little informal update of where we're at with the Changemaker curriculum. So for those of you who are, new to the topic, the current version of the Changemaker curriculum started about 5 years ago, when some alums, had the idea to do something about land and sea stewardship. And we started to look at, how do we engage with the place where we're at. But actually, the question over, the debate over, is the IB diploma the best suited to UWC? If not, what do we want? Or what do we want alongside the IB diploma, right? That debate has been ongoing, I think, for the last 30 or 40 years. Right. I remember I was a student who graduated in 2005. I went to Waterford Kamklaba in Eswatini, and we were having those same discussions back then. So throughout the years, various UWCs have started experimenting. And this is the 5th year of our experimentation here at Atlantic College. So I guess the basic principles behind what we want from the Changemaker curriculum is to develop some new courses that we can offer for students to do that go beyond disciplinary boundaries and that combine different disciplines, that maybe also combine academic disciplines that are not exactly high school subjects. Yeah, we want it to be experiential. We don't want it to be exam-based. And, we want all of these courses to have a real-world project-based impact, right? Where actually a lot of the assessment will stem from, client feedback, because we're going to do real work out in the real world. So about 5 years ago, this started with some experimentation on the land and sea side of things. And then in the year 2019, there was some more added to it, where we started some more formal experimentation also on the peace and mediation side of things. So there were 2 projects that ran in parallel. One of them was a theater and dialogue kind of set up, and then the other one was what has become my Changemaker unit and my baby that I've been carrying over the last 3 years, which ran under the title Dialogue and Peacemaking. Sometimes it also runs under the title Dialogue, Peace and Social Justice, and it basically sits at the nexus of communication studies, politics, anthropology, facilitation, project management, and all of these things. 2019 to 2020 was an interesting year because, of course, then the COVID crisis hit. And during that year, initially, not knowing that COVID was going to happen, actually a lot more staff started to get involved. And started to think about more units that we could trial, or more aspects that could join those bigger units, because we're doing all of this in the afternoon CAS program essentially. So with a 2-hour session per week with the students, there's a limit to how much of one course you can prototype and pilot. So by the end of 2020, the 2019 to 2020 school year, we actually had 9 teachers who were going to develop various courses. And so in a way, the COVID pandemic and last school year, where we were pretty much confined to campus, became an opportunity because a lot of our regular outreach service could not happen, right? We could not take students into Cardiff, Wales was in national lockdown, and so on and so forth. So we basically just went for it and piloted 7 different units last year. So if you go to the next slide, I think, yeah. And of these 7, we're currently this year, we're running 6. So a lot of these are in their 2nd iteration, and then a few of them are maybe in their 3rd or 4th. So we have big data, which is, you know, sitting at the computer science, but also data communication side of things. So it's run by Shan, who's a mathematics teacher and also our head of year, and she's really keen on, you know, how can we teach students to engage with data in a critical way? How can we use data skills to make sort of empirically informed policy recommendations and so on? So last year they had a really good project week where they basically took on different data sets and then came up with pitches for projects to, you know, create something with impact on a situation. Political ecology is now running in its 4th or 5th iteration, and that's sort of grown out of that land stewardship part of the initial ideas, and it's, you know, yeah, political ecology already implies some of the disciplines it engages with. It's very much focused on food systems, but also more philosophically and experientially, like the relationship between, you know, humans and nature, and, you know, some of the fundamental questions about, you know, how we separate ourselves from nature and how experiencing nature in a more personal way is actually crucial in terms of tackling some of our biggest challenges, because in order to want to protect something, we need to know it and love it, right? Ocean systems is in its 2nd year, and Emma is going to talk a lot more about that. Dialogue, Peace and Social Justice is mine, and that's in its 3rd year, and I'll give you more of an overview over that. Narratives for Social Change is run by my colleague who also teaches global politics and history. And this course is all centered around the students creating a pop-up museum. So last year, they created a whole installation and sort of informative display and multimedia exhibit around police brutality around the world. And so through this project-based learning, they unpack a whole lot of things about curation, collective memory, how do narratives shape collective identities, how can narratives be manipulated, how do histories and myths sort of get flattened into one-dimensional stories over time, and how can we recomplicate them and unflatten them. They're currently working on a really lovely project about Atlantic College's LGBT history, where they have actually interviewed some alums from various decades about their experiences at the college. And then lastly, we're also running Taking a Stance, which is a public speaking course, basically. So how these will fit into sort of the final output that we're hoping to, you know, pilot full time with students in maybe a year and a half, right, is still sort of in development. Some of these current units might merge. So I can, for instance, see a lot of overlap between, or a lot of synergies between my unit and the narratives one. Similarly, big data and Taking a Stance might take something more of a core skills kind of position, right? And so those are the kinds of things we're figuring out at the moment. Next slide, please. So yeah, the course I'm developing and that I want to talk a little bit more about is Dialogue, Peace and Social Justice. It's been really, really fun to do this together with students. And it's also been really great to see it sort of crystallize into something more concrete over the last 2.5 years. So we started in 2019 and had a really great project week, actually one of the last weeks before the COVID lockdown came into play, where we went out into Cardiff and worked at Oasis Refugee Center and basically held a mini conference with refugees and some of our students And the topic of that conference was dreams for the future and sort of turning points in life, because we figured that, you know, our young people and people who've just arrived in Cardiff actually have a lot in common in terms of having to make big decisions about their future and sort of reconsidering, you know, what they want in life and so on. So we really threw people in the deep end in terms of running this thing, because we had very little knowledge of who we were going to work with, how fluent their English was, and so on. So it really taught students how to, you know, adapt on the spot, how to, you know, have contingency plans, and, you know, really to whittle down also like what is the main purpose of the session, you know, and what is a successful outcome. And it was really lovely. And, you know, that was sort of at the time when people started elbow bumping each other. And then sadly, 2 weeks later, we went into, you know, lockdown, had to repatriate all the students. So that year was cut a bit short. But then the 2020 to 2021 year sort of really helped to build out some of those things. So we did a lot of facilitator training. We did a lot of sort of engagement with individual and interpersonal psychology. And so really looking at the micro level of peace building, how can we be intentional about communication and so on. And then with that, some skills to, you know, run effective workshops, to really be aware of, you know, how we can obviously not socially engineer situations, but what is in our control as facilitators to nudge a group towards, you know, certain behaviors or outcomes in certain situations. So I have Ves and Tim with me, who are going to talk a little bit about their own experiences with that course. So I'm going to hand over to Ves.
Hi everyone, I'm Ves. I'm a second year here at AC, and I've been a part of Dialogue and Peacemaking for 1.5 years now, and it's been a great experience overall. When I signed up for this Changemaker last year, I expected I expected it to be more global politics oriented than it turned out to be, but it was actually a very positive surprise. We've been spending a lot of time on self-reflection, on looking at the self, the brain, emotions, and just talking and reflecting on humans and human conflict. And this helped us develop a lot of skills in facilitating group sessions, group projects, and a lot of the teamwork skills were built as well. In our project week, we spent time discussing how exactly to engage a crowd and how to communicate an important message while at the same time maintaining a level of respect and being sensitive to everyone. So that was very, very interesting. In our project week, me and a couple of friends developed the gender norms workshops that we had at the end of last year, and then later on we continued by having the rape culture and consent workshops this year. And it's been very, very very interesting overall. I think I can sum it up like this.
Cool.
Maybe.
Yeah, let's pass on to Tim.
Yeah, I'm also my second year at UWC Atlantic, and I found a lot of the same things as Ves, in that the dialogue and peacemaking cast really subverted my kind of expectations for the course, because like Ves, I thought that the course would be a lot of international politics, Glopo, things like that. But I found that once I entered the course, it was actually a lot more of a focus on the micro rather than the macro. But I thought that this was actually a really good place to be starting, because like Ves mentioned, we worked on a lot of individual initiatives where we did things like the gender norms workshops, like the consent workshops. But we also worked a lot on developing ourselves as people in order to facilitate the kind of dialogue and peacemaking that we're looking for. We did spend, of course, some time looking at international conflicts. For for example, we got a first-hand experience, somebody told their story of being in the recent unrest in Northern Ireland. But we also spent a lot of time talking about psychology. We spent a lot of time talking about dialogue. We talked about being inclusive. And what I found about the course was that it was really kind of living what it was preaching, because the course is all about making peace and about overcoming conflict and working through it to be better. And kind of being in this kind of experimental kind of cast was kind of living that, of going through these challenges of being an experiment, but working with the other people in the cast to make it better and better until, of course, eventually it can be implemented as a UWC Atlantic thing. So yeah, that's my experience.
Thank you so much. I mean, that, yeah, those are very nice words to hear. So if we could have the next slide. Yeah, I mean, just to wrap it up, I guess, you know, obviously sort of the final product for this, we'll look at the macro level also a lot more, but with, you know, limited time to trial things with students, I was really interested in the micro level because that's where action can feasibly happen for us right now, right? We're not, you know, we're not going to negotiate a peace deal at an international level right now, but what we can do is really look at ourselves and at our campus community. And I think some of the workshops that have come out of this that have been completely peer-led, where, you know, our group then also trained up further facilitators, and it's sort of spread around the college. So all students had, you know, really good discussions around gender norms and, you know, in what ways, you know, can femininity and masculinity be toxic. We had some really good sessions on consent culture and so on, you know, and I think we're building a toolkit where people are empowered to design these sessions and run with it. And I think like seeing those ripple effects is really nice. And I'm also really happy that I have Wes and Tim with me in the second year as co-facilitators, so that I can, you know, build on their feedback and we can, you know, figure out where to take it next. So yeah, it's been really, really exciting to work on that. So
Sylvie?
Yeah.
If I may add, this year as leaders of the cast, we can actually see how much background work has been done to develop the program. And I think it's been very beautiful and very exciting to see how the course developed only in my time here. And I can imagine that in the future with the next leaders, it is going to develop into a much more balanced micro and macro approach. And it is a great platform for students to discuss issues that maybe we don't discuss that much in the college. Because, for example, we have PICO and we have STUCO and Cisco and so on, but we didn't really have a platform to discuss issues of toxic gender norms or rape culture. And this workshop has been both educational and freeing in terms of having that opportunity.
And yeah, also to have it for all students, right? Like with a Peace Council talk, you know, it's sort of self-selecting who goes there to some degree, right? So to have skilled facilitators in every student house and sort of across the different councils that can then roll out sessions where we have, you know, 7 different talks running at the same time in different venues. And you know, we can, as staff, we can be sure that they're done in a way that is safe and you don't need a staff member present, right? That's actually been, you know, I've found that really, you know, exciting and empowering. And yeah, so, and then hopefully when we can, we'll take it out beyond the confines of our campus as well. Yeah, sorry.
If I can add something to what Beth said, I think the real value of having the dialogue and peacemaking be so flexible is that it's really able to stay on top of trends in society and the world, which is a very UWC thing to do. And also, like Beth mentioned, it's able to stay and match and be flexible with each individual batch of students. Because I think one of the most fascinating experiences I had between last year and this year is that despite talking about more or less the same things, the environment of the cast and like the feel of the cast is markedly different, but like also in a positive way. So I think really the value of programs such as this is that it demonstrates the ability to continuously improving, and that kind of flexibility is really needed when you're developing a kind of future-focused program like the dialogue and peacemaking and social justice thing.
I'm just picking up on a question here from Ulrich. So we've been talking about CAS quite a lot, and basically the final product that we're hoping to, fully pilot and launch, probably not next school year, but the year after, will be an alternative to the IB mill. It's just at the moment for feasibility within our timetable, we're using the CAS program as a way to slot those times in when we can work with the students, basically. Yeah, so that's where we're at with that. Right, I'm gonna pass over to Emma, I think.
Hello, afternoon. My name is Emma Pilling. I'm the Geography and Environmental Systems and Societies teacher here. I've been here for just over 2 years, and prior to that, I was head of department for 23 years in schools in Wales and Spain. So why Changemaker? Partly for the challenge of doing something different, but also for the opportunity to be able to deliver sustainable education, so take parts of the ESS and the geography course and be able to deliver it in an environment where we were away from the rigid specification of the IB, away from the content-heavy syllabus, where sometimes I find that I might have 20 minutes to teach acidification when I could easily spend 3 weeks teaching about it. So it's nice to be able to move away from that and to move away from the exam factory as well, where some lessons I find myself saying, right, this is the topic, these are the possible exam questions, you need to include this, include these key terminology, and you're a winner. And that's a horrible way to teach sometimes, and it must be a worse way to learn. So Ocean Systems certainly gave us the opportunity to incorporate sustainable education and to utilise the best laboratory we have in terms of the Bristol Channel on our doorstep. So I'm 1/3 of the team delivering Ocean Systems, Sov, chemistry and ESS teacher, and Martin, who is the head of science, also delivers the course with us. It's had quite a rapid change, so perhaps I won't have so much to say as Sylvie did in the last session just then. The current course has only really been in place since September. Last year we devised the course, and I can't speak for Sov and Martin perhaps, but I think I tried to put too much into it. I was looking at coastal management, mass tourism, aggregates, overfishing, migration, climate change, and trying to fit all of this in. And I think it must have been a learned behaviour from 23 years of my teaching career. Sov and Martin look at the more practical side. Last year they were looking at water sampling, for example, sedimentation flow, and looking at potential energy on our slipway through tidal energy. But for me, and I know Sylvie can back me up on this, I was constantly going to Sylvie and saying, it doesn't feel like this is a change maker. I just feel that I'm delivering, I don't know, lessons, geography lessons on steroids. So we had to have a really big think, or I had to have a rethink about the course for this year and how we could really deliver sustainable education in a different way. So we have really narrowed down the course this year. We are teaching 4 main topics, so coastal management, plankton, microplastics, and acidification, so linked with climate change. We have split the group into 2, so they are on a rotation. I have a group for a term, and Sov and Martin take the other half of the group. Last year we were on a rotation of 3 weeks and it was really hectic. So this year we have calmed down, taken a breath to allow us to dig deeper into what we are covering. So I set the context for our students. So I look at why we need to fix the problem of acidification. So we look at causes, effects, solutions, how we can be sustainable in looking at our future possibilities for climate change. What is the problem, the issue with microplastics? What is the point of plankton? Why is plankton so important within our ocean systems? So with my sessions, I set the context. Sov and Martin are doing fantastic work, and I know Sov is in this call somewhere, fantastic work in that their side, the students are designing and building prototype devices to measure microplastics, plankton and acidification, looking at how to take water samples at different depths. So I'm setting the context, and they are actually creating the machinery, the devices, the prototypes that can actually be tested out in the Bristol Channel. And I think prototypes have already been tested in the swimming pool. And so teams are going to swap over after Christmas, so everyone will have a chance. We have obviously offered some water safety training courses as well. And myself and Sov have teamed up with the Marine Conservation Society. We've got a separate little group called Wave Makers instead of Changemakers. And they've been fantastic in helping us with ideas for projects. We had a fantastic talk from one of their scientists yesterday on seagrass, salt marshes, and also coral reefs. So it is very much in its early stages. Okay, we're keeping it fluid, no pun intended. Okay, but it certainly feels more Changemaker for me, I think, in delivering it this year, and I'm hoping our students are enjoying it as much as I am. And I did a session, well, I didn't, the students did a session on acidification last week. And I said, right, what do you want to do? What do you want to get out of this? What is the end product? And so I had a group of 10 students in my class for 2 hours, laughing, enthusiastic, motivated, on task, and just incredibly noisy. And it was fantastic, the ideas they were coming out with. And I was just sitting back, interjecting every now and again, because I can't help myself. But I was just sitting there thinking, this is what learning should be about, as opposed to that exam factory that we have become used to, that has become the IB. So I'm going to pass you on. I don't know who's speaking first, whether it's Vicky or Caris, to give you a different perspective, obviously, from the students as to what we have been covering since September.
Yeah, so hi guys, I'm Caris. I'm a first year student here at AC. I'm from the United States. I'll let Vicky introduce herself really fast, just so you know who she is. Vicky.
Hi, I'm Victoria. I'm 17 years old and I'm from Norway, as you probably can see. And I'm also an IB1 student, and I'm a part of the Ocean Systems course.
Okay, so I'll be talking a little bit first. So where I'm from, I live in the middle of the desert. So one of the main reasons why I came to AC was its unique location and its beautiful seafront. So I knew that when I was choosing a cast that I wanted something that had to do with the ocean and with the seafront. So when I chose Ocean Systems, I knew I wanted to do it because it had to involve all of that. What I loved about Ocean Systems is that it's active learning. It's not just sitting in the classroom, learning a bunch of stuff, and then, you know, just having to write it down on paper, but it's going out. It has both a classroom, a workshop, and an outdoors learning experience. It also, I think we talk a lot about the problems in our community and in our world. We don't do anything to solve these problems. So the Changemaker course is all about finding solutions to these problems. And I've found that during this Ocean Systems, so we really have been more focused on the solutions to these problems, not just talking about the problems in our world. So our groups are split in half this year. So my group has spent the majority of our time with wonderful Emma here in the classroom. The last thing that we did was ocean acidification. So right now we're working on a video to present to the whole school to educate the school on ocean acidification levels at our college. We've also been doing a bunch of coastal management. So we've been looking how to solve the seafront problems that the college is dealing with. And in future lessons, we're hoping to study topics such as plankton and microplastics. Something we've also done in this course is we spent 2 weeks at the beginning of term and doing water safety training course in the outdoor pool. And for those of you who don't know, the outdoor pool is very, very cold, but don't worry guys, it's a very good wake up after codes. So yeah, so we learned how, like if we were stranded out in the ocean, how to flip boats, how to save each other, how to breathe, like how to just survive if we were out there. So that was really fun. And there's some pictures in there that you can see showing all of that. And that's also another example of really good active learning, because you're not only learning from the instructors that are teaching this, but you're also learning from your peers, which I think is super important, which is something that I love about this course, is that you're learning from your peers and your teachers and yourself. So it's really learning. It's just like the best type of learning altogether. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to continue Ocean Systems this term and for the rest of the year. And I'll pass you on to Vicky.
Hi, I'm on the other group, so I'm on Sav's and Martin's group. And as Caris explained, we spent the 2 first weeks of the year in the pool doing water safety. And right now we're working on a really exciting project. So I'm designing and building a microplastic filtration pump. and I've drawn and designed the construction of the pump. And right now I'm building it by hand, as you can see in the picture up to the left. That's me trying to make a part of it with a tool that makes plastic or like cuts plastic. And so the pump filtrates water through 3 different filters with different densities that will gather microplastic. And the purpose of the pump is to experiment on how much microplastic we can find in the Bristol channel that we have like right outside our campus. So this is a really, really interesting and useful experiment because it shows us how big of a problem littering in our nature is. And I chose ocean systems because I wanted to work with the sea, which is a part of our world that I really love. And we have our beautiful seafront that we use. And I felt like I couldn't go to AC and not experience the sea that we have here because it's so big part of the campus. And so I wanted to be part of the Changemaker course and the Ocean Systems course because it gives me the opportunity to use my maritime skills and be creative and practical through building the pumps and building all the experiments, and to use my knowledge from subjects like math, geography, physics to create interesting projects and experiments. And so the Ocean System course has been a really good learning experience, not only academically, but also it has taught me a lot about myself. When we're told that we're creating a project, I did not think I would be able to come up with a water pump by myself, but I proved myself wrong, and soon I have designed a school. And I really enjoyed the Ocean System course because it lets me experiment on and work with critical world problems that needs to be solved. And for example, an example of one of the problems in our world is the amount of microplastic that we can find in our oceans. And it's really important that we minimize this amount. And through this course, we get to use our skills and create projects and learn about how we can change our world for the better. And this is a really important part of education that should be more focused about. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky. That's just a lovely sentence about how we can change our world for the better. I couldn't summarize it any better myself. So I'll pass on to Nahid now, I think.
Thank you. And I have the deepest admiration for the colleagues on this call and the students, and you know, just clearly you can see the passion, the thoughtfulness, the innovation that's going into what's here. And so for me, this speaks volumes about the character of our school, right? The character of the people who are here, the character of our students. And, you know, I'm sure as you could listen to them speak, you could glean some particular ideas, right? And some similarities that seem to cut across the experience. A lot of it was about passion, space to be able to create and innovate on our terms, if you will. And by our terms, I mean the changing terms that are there all the time. Our students change all the time, and so also on their terms. The idea of being able to work collaboratively and together and on things that are real, that real experience that helps our students to feel like they're actually making some sort of tangible difference in whatever small way possible, that they have the agency to be able to do that. And so as we think about what the future in some ways of education looks like for us as a school, this is one of the big incredible problems that I'm having fun wrestling with at the moment. And we're at the beginning stages of thinking about that, but we're not starting from scratch. As you can see, the work that's already been done here is tremendous for us. And so what I'm seeing is our sort of collective role at the moment and over the next couple of months, helping to think about and refine, are really two things. One is, as we approach our 60th anniversary, a tremendous occasion for Atlantic, but also for the UWC movement writ large. How do we think about what we want to stand for in the next 10 years? That's a question that we've been asking ourselves here. And what we've been talking about is the two main pillars of a UWC experience in the why, right? In the why it is that we do what we do, the purpose. And what you can find very clearly in the mission is around peace and sustainability. And you've seen both those things evidenced in these two presentations here. And so when we think about those two things, what happens if you begin to overlap them? Like a concentric circle, right, between them. And we think about that overlap between sustainability, environmental in particular, and peace. And we think about the inherent overlap between our human systems and our natural systems. And indeed, almost all the problems that we face on the environmental side are in some way linked to our human systems, which are in themselves deeply unequal. And so how do we help to prepare students to grapple with reconciling some of these challenges that are through none of their own doing, they're through our generation's doing? How do we help to equip them to be able to make a difference in those domains? And thinking of the overlap between them, understanding that interconnection between human and natural systems is going to be key. And more so, the injustice that sits very much at the nexus of those systems. So the hope, I think, in some ways, is to be able to equip students to manage that complexity, because that becomes deeply complex. And we just know from COP26, when we think about what it means to fund $100 billion, a year or whatever it is, to be able to support developing countries in their innovation towards climate. And we think about where does that even come from? What is the root of even the need of that to take place? And we think about the ways in which in our world we contribute to some of the problems that we see today. And we'll obviously note that it tends to be countries that are developed and those that are from northern hemispheres primarily. And often the impact is felt by those in the southern hemisphere. And interestingly enough, of course, if you look through history, part of the reason for why many of our northern countries are in the situation they're in is because of the pillage that was done over numerous decades and centuries of the global south. And so when we look at the situation that we're in now, it's complex to understand the way in which we have turned into what we've turned into. And without attempting to try to reconcile that as a complex intersection of systems, if we don't look at it in that kind of way, we will inevitably fall short of understanding the totality of the situation. And so thinking about education in that sort of complex way, then the question becomes, how do we do it, right? How do we then go about actually making some meaningful impact in that kind of way, if that becomes in some ways our purpose, driven deeply by what the UWC mission is? How do we create space? You've heard several comments here about this being done in a really opportunistic way, which is what makes it so incredible as well, right? That our teachers and students are doing this without really the structural support around them to do so. It speaks to their commitment and passion. And so for me, it's about helping to create space for this to happen. So how do we begin with a pilot program of sorts, where we're able to actually not have this sit on the periphery or on the side, but actually as an integral part of a UWC Atlantic and hopefully beyond that, education. And so that's something that we are in the midst of thinking about at this moment in time. And as Sylvie alluded to, hopefully with some movement in the next year or two. That doesn't mean that there isn't room for progression or advancement with the IB. They're obviously a strong partner of UWC education as well. But in some ways, unique schools, I would suggest, like ours and other UWC schools, we have the opportunity, I think, to be able to innovate in unique ways and take real advantage of the tremendous diversity of students that we have, take advantage of the unique place in which we exist. And you'll note in both the courses that we've talked about, place becomes a very important thing, the local context in which we are in, taking full advantage of that. So just as we think about the complexity of those things together, looking forward to finding ways in which we can deliver this that are sustainable, that are integrated, and that allow us to not have it pile on onto what students already do, but instead to make it an integral part of what's there. So we look forward to, in the near future, being able to communicate more with you as our plans develop. With that, I'll pass it back off to Keith.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nahid. And thank you, everyone that's spoken so far. It's been really, really good for everyone to hear. Just to sort of mention, if you have any questions, please do pop it into the chat. We've got a few. So I think the first one we'll come to will be Toti Elwood Aris. You happy to unmute yourself to ask your question?
Hi, everyone. Well done. Amazing project happening, and love the phrase Changemaker. It's the burden we all live with as alumni. I'm really interested to hear whether you've been talking to the IB about this. I have a role in the IB as I'm on the board. So I would, they're going through a diploma review, and it irks me when I hear that teachers are talking about the exam factory. It's upsetting because that's not what the IB diploma should be about. It never should have been, and it's stuck a little bit, and it's going through a review at the moment. I'd love to hear if you've been talking to them, and if you haven't, I want to connect you because CAS has also got stuck, and it would be great to see this kind of weave its way into a new version of CAS as part of that review.
Nahid, do you want to take this one?
Sure. And so, absolutely. About 2 years ago, I believe now is when the former principal Peter did have a chance to have a connect with the IB in the early stages, sort of almost like pre-diploma review timeframe. Last week, we had a call as a Council of UWC International, meet with Ole Peke, the new Director General, and I'm able to hear some of his thoughts. Adrian Kearney as well also had a conversation with UWC movement at large very recently as well, and so dialogue is definitely happening there. Ole Peke was very interested in hearing more about some of the innovations that we have taken place, and definitely wanting our schools to be testing beds of innovation, and we're also interested in some innovation that could be taking place outside of the scope of the IB, but that may be able to work its way back in sort of the 4 or 5 year time horizon. So definitely that is an avenue that we will be pursuing, but we're also not going to put all of our eggs in the IB basket, so to speak, and also look at ways of moving a bit outside the IB bounds as well.
Brilliant, thank you. We've got a question that's coming from Ulrich Eckel, which is, I think, a bit of a follow-on question. Ulrich, do you want to unmute yourself to ask?
Yeah, so I've had 4 kids who are going through the IB, 3 in UWCs, 1 not in the UWC. I think the IB is a system that is really burdensome. It's a mill. It eats away all the creative energy. I mean, AC formed it, but now it's become a machine to channel folks into mainstream careers. Bankers and you name it, administrators, that have brought the world to this point. I think to make it short, the curriculum should be cleaned out. The economics curriculum is theology. It got us into this terrible situation. I was last week in Glasgow as a protester outside. It got us into this situation. The global politics is Western ideology. History never touches upon colonialism, which still persists in a refined form and which defines the European and American, now make no difference to Europe, America, history in the last 300 years. Racism, it's our idea. So how can we build an alternative to this terrible machine, IB? One last sentence. I got a lady, a Syrian refugee into UWC. I helped her to prepare in Germany. I mean, what is she going to learn there? If she wants to become a doctor, fine, stay away from ideology. But basically, we have a Western ideological system that needs a strict overhaul. And look, I don't want to burden Nahid's task by praising you, but I'm absolutely flabbergasted, of your analysis. It's so modest, it's so correct. Sorry, do you get the compliments from the wrong side? Check.
Thank you, Ulrich. Nahid, do you have any comments, or does Sylvia or Emma want to say?
I mean, I'd like to respond to some of the things Ulrich said, and I agree that the way that lots of schools teach the IB is very, one-sided, and it's a real tragedy, because actually, if you look at the syllabus of a subject like history, which is something that I've taught here in the past, and also a subject like global politics, the actual syllabus in the IB is wide open. Yeah. we run a course on Middle Eastern and North African history here. There's nothing in the IB that says you need to teach World War I, World War II, Cold War in Europe at all, right? Similarly with global politics, one of the central and first theories I teach my students, and one of my main theoretical angle and framework, is post-colonialism. Yeah. So I think there is a lot that can be done within the IB. However, yeah, the more radical and less exam-based things, like that's where we're a little bit stuck, and we're currently looking beyond the IB, right? So yeah, that's sort of my take on that.
Brilliant. I think for the next question, we'll go to Susan Winter. Hi, Susan, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, just getting there. So first of all, thank you all for including the wider community in this discussion, because I think it's a very important and relevant discussion for everything that we're faced with. And I'm very excited to have the opportunity to re-engage at a very early stage around some of these ideas. So congratulations to Sylvie and the group of teachers there that have been innovating in the last 2 or 3 years. Like a lot of alumni, when you have a discussion like this, there's lots of things firing in my brain. And I'm going to start a little bit in regards to how well I think this fits with the history of the UWC movement, particularly in regards to Atlantic College, because I listen to what the students are saying there. And essentially for me, this new Changemaker curriculum actually fills the void of what we talked about initially as a college in terms of a vision of providing experiential education for a broad group of international students. So for me, it's at the foundation and core of what we are supposed to be doing. It's very innovative. I am very excited, having now kind of got some life experience in various positions and jobs, to look at this in terms of opportunities, both for alumni to engage in meaningful ways with the students as they learn, for potentially corporations if they have projects that fit with what students are trying to do. And also in regards to one of the things I was excited to read about when my daughter came there was the group that's supporting students if they come up with project ideas. And I'm sure the microplastics pump is one of these. How do you get that kind of concept and idea? How do you make it real, put it into the world, and potentially commercialize that in order to generate funds? And so for me, there's lots of opportunity here beyond the learning and the academics. And I think it fits extraordinarily well with what the original IB intention was. So I think there's lots of phenomenal links here. And I know it's going to take a long time and a lot of people to contribute. But just off the bat, I mean, this is just incredible. And so congratulations to you all for moving in this direction.
Cool, brilliant, thank you. I don't know if any of you guys have any comments to that. I mean, just to give a bit of a sort of practical insight, we're working very, very closely with the Lighthouse Project. So the Lighthouse is a sort of grant-making part of our campus at the moment. They support students in, you know, project planning, writing funding applications, pitching their projects, and so on. So actually, there's a lot of cross-fertilization between the two. And yeah, 2 of the courses specifically at the moment, big data and narratives for social change, are actually working with one of the Lighthouse coordinators each on an ongoing basis to do exactly that. So that, for instance, the big data students can support other students who need a bit more data communication backup for their ideas, right? While with the narratives project, you know, they give a lot in terms of, you know, project planning skills and so on and so forth. So yeah, there's a lot of like interesting stuff happening in that space already. Yeah. Brilliant. So I think the next question we'll come to is from Andrew. Andrew, do you want to unmute yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. This is absolutely amazing. This is fantastic. I'm so impressed. I was at MUCI as a teacher 15 years ago when we had the first student sort of drop the IB diploma and just do her higher levels. And then she went up to the Himalayas for a couple of weeks and did a research project. And then a few years later, they kind of went off in a certain direction for the project-based diploma. And then there's this one. And I mean, on that thread, I think it's so amazing what you guys are doing. It's amazing what many other UWCs are doing. I'm curious how this fits in with the larger efforts to coordinate UWC, because it's sort of against the behemoth that is the IB and the strength that is the IB. It seems like it's really cool that all of our schools are doing their own thing, but I think we'll only have the ground to make a broader shift if we're kind of working together on something. And I know there's some efforts on that, so I'd love to hear more about that.
I'm happy to speak to that, Keith. That's okay. I think you raise a great point, Andrew. And so what we're doing currently at the movement level is trying to think about what might the architecture look like of, for now we'll call it a UWC diploma, right? Like what could that look like, and how does it create enough space for the diversity of schools that we have with the various requirements that they each have. Some are national legislated types of, some are donor related, some are just restrictions based on whatever else might be. That is conceptual enough that it can cater for the diversity of schools that we have, but yet also mission aligned enough that it actually points us in a direction of some degree of innovation and mission alignedness. I think that's probably one of the most important things for me. And then part of that is beginning to share the various innovations that we may come up with that may feel really good for our own contexts, but that maybe with some adaptation could be equally amazing in a different context. And so that's part of what we're also kind of working on at a global sort of level. Just to say that it is not easy. It is a little bit difficult to arrive at a sort of platform that way, and to be able to share things readily across, not necessarily that there isn't a desire to do so, but it's more so the practicality probably around it that sometimes tends to be a small barrier, but no doubt can be overcome. But that's something that's being worked on at a network-wide level.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nahid. I'm not sure if anyone else has any questions. Please do pop them in the chat. But otherwise, my colleague Magda has actually shared a link to the Lighthouse project Lighthouse initiative that Sylvie mentioned. It's definitely something, if you're interested, I think you should have a quick look at and read. It's one of sort of the really exciting things we've got going on at the college. But if we haven't got any more questions, I just want to say thank you. Thank you, Nahid. Thank you, Sylvie. Thank you, Emma. Thank you sort of to all the students that joined us today. We hope you enjoyed it. If anyone is interested in getting involved or supporting any of the units, or sort of sharing their experience with sort of teachers, please do get in touch with us. We're always keen for alumni or parents to get involved and sort of, I guess, connect and engage and learn a little bit more about what's going on. But we hope you enjoyed today's events. We will continue to sort of do them throughout the year. I think we have an In Conversation talk in 2 weeks, which we hope you'll join us. That'll be really brilliant. I think sort of the feedback from these talks we've been having has been great. But just want to say once again, thank you for joining us. If you missed any of this is recorded and will be shared on our YouTube channel, where you can sort of see any of the older talks we've had. It's sort of any talks we have in the future will be going up there as well. But once again, I just want to say thank you to all the speakers today. It's been really good and we've really enjoyed it. And again, we hope you continue to join us for any future talks and events that we host.